Section 25 of Reviews by Oscar Wilde. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Corey Samuel. Reviews by Oscar Wilde. Edited by Robert Ross. Section 25. Pleasing and Prattling. Pall Mall Gazette, August 4th, 1880. 60 years ago, when Sir Walter Scott was inaugurating an era of historical romance, The Wolf of Badenoch was a very popular book. To us, its interest is more archaeological than artistic, and its characters seem merely puppets parading in 14th century costume. It is true our grandfathers thought differently. They liked novels in which the heroine exclaims, "Peace with thine impudence, Sir Knave! Dost thou dare to speak thus in presence of the Lady Eleanor de Selby? A greybeard's ire shall never," while the hero remarks, "The welkin reddens i' the west." In fact, they considered that language like this is exceedingly picturesque, and gives the necessary historical perspective. Nowadays, however, few people have the time to read a novel that requires a glossary to explain it, and we fear that without a glossary the general reader will hardly appreciate the value of such expressions as noff, bouck, herborough, papillard, coeep, wreaths, pankers, agroted laurel, and horrow tallow-catch, all of which occur in the first few pages of The Wolf of Badenoch. In a novel we want life, not learning, and unfortunately Sir Thomas Lauder lays himself open to the criticism Johnson made on Spenser, that "in affecting the ancients he writ no language." Still, there is a healthy spirit of adventure in the book, and no doubt many people will be interested to see the kind of novel the public liked in 1825. Keep My Secret, by Miss G. M. Robins, is very different. It is quite modern both in manner and in matter. The heroine, Miss Olga Damien, when she is a little girl, tries to murder Mr. Victor Burnside. Mr. Burnside, who is tall, blue-eyed, and amber-haired, makes her promise never to mention the subject to anyone. This, in fact, is the secret that gives the title to the book. The result is that Miss Damien is blackmailed by a fascinating and unscrupulous uncle, and is nearly burnt to death in the secret chamber of an old castle. The novel at the end gets too melodramatic in character, and the plot becomes a chaos of incoherent incidents, but the writing is clever and bright. It is just the book, in fact, for a summer holiday, as it is never dull, and yet makes no demands at all upon the intellect. Mrs. Chetwynd gives us a new type of widow. As a rule, in fiction, widows are delightful, designing, and deceitful. But Mrs. Dorriman is not by any means a Cleopatra in crape. She is a weak, retiring woman, very feeble and very feminine, and with the simplicity that is characteristic of such sweet and shallow natures, she allows her brother to defraud her of all her property. The widow is rather a bore, and the brother is quite a bear, but Margaret Rivers, who, to save her sister from poverty, marries a man she does not love, is a cleverly conceived character, and Lady Lyons is an admirable old dowager. The book can be read without any trouble, and was probably written without any trouble also. The style is prattling and pleasing. The plot of Delamere is not very new. On the death of her husband, Mrs. de Ruthven discovers that the estates belong by right not to her son Raymond, but to her niece Fleurette. As she keeps her knowledge to herself, a series of complications follows, but the cousins are ultimately united in marriage, and the story ends happily. Mr. Curzon writes in a clever style, and though its construction is rather clumsy, the novel is a thoroughly interesting one. A Daughter of Fife tells us of the love of a young artist for a Scotch fisher girl. The character sketches are exceptionally good, especially that of David Promoter, a fisherman who leaves his nets to preach the gospel, and the heroine is quite charming till she becomes civilized. The book is a most artistic combination of romantic feeling with realistic form, and it is pleasant to read descriptions of Scotch scenery that do not represent the land of mist and mountain, as a sort of chromolithograph from the Brompton Road. In Mr. Speight's novel, A Barren Title, we have an impoverished earl who receives an allowance from his relations, on condition of his remaining single, being all the time secretly married and the father of a grown-up son. The story is improbable and amusing. On the whole, there is a great deal to be said for our ordinary English novelists. They all have some story to tell, and most of them tell it in an interesting manner. Where they fail is in concentration of style. Their characters are far too eloquent, and talk themselves to tatters. What we want is a little more reality and a little less rhetoric. We are most grateful to them that they have not as yet accepted any frigid formula, nor stereotyped themselves into a school, but we wish that they would talk less and think more. They lead us through a barren desert of verbiage to a mirage that they call life. We wander aimlessly through a very wilderness of words, in search of one touch of nature. However, one should not be too severe on English novels. They are the only relaxation of the intellectually unemployed. 1. The Wolf of Badenoch, a historical romance of the 14th century, by Sir Thomas Lauder, Hamilton, Adams and Company. 2. Keep My Secret, by G. M. Robbins, Bentley and Son. 3. Mrs. Dorriman, by the Hon. Mrs. Henry Chetwynd, Chapman Hall. 4. Delamere, by G. Curzon, Sampson Low Marsden and Company. 5. A Daughter of Fife, by Amelia Barr, James Clark and Company. 6. A Barren Title, by T. W. Speight, Chatto and Windus. End of section 25. Pleasing and Prattling.